a newlywed bride, who is 3 months pregnant, actually agreed to let another man install a camera in her bedroom. This situation alone is baffling to even think about. According to common sense, who would willingly expose their most private moments to a camera lens, especially in a newlywed couple's bedroom? But Lian insisted on agreeing anyway, and even had it installed right above the bed in plain sight, without even attempting to cover it up. This kind of operation is truly baffling. But even stranger things were yet to come. The real person who killed Wang Shikong wasn't Wang Tianyou at all. It was Li Yan. What shocked Liang Wenchao even more was the upload time of this recording. The timestamp showed it was the day after the incident, meaning this evidence had existed all along. And the detective in charge of the case was none other than his wife, Abo. In other words, Abio had obtained this crucial recording early on but chose to conceal it. She clearly knew Wang Tianyou might just be a scapegoat, yet she let the case proceed as planned. At this moment, Liang Wenchao's world completely collapsed. When Liang Wen, the air in the ward, seemed to freeze instantly when Kao played that recording. It was an audio clip from Wang Shikong's phone, time-stamped precisely during the incident. The quarreling voices in the recording were crystal clear on that fateful night. One of the voices was unmistakably Li Yan's. More crucially, judging by the content of the conversation, the actual perpetrator wasn't Wang Tianyou at all, but Li Yan. What Liang Wenchao found hardest to accept was that this recording wasn't newly discovered evidence. Documentation showed it had actually been uploaded to the police system the very next day after the incident, meaning this evidence had existed all along. It was just artificially concealed. And the person responsible for safeguarding this evidence was none other than his wife, Abao. Liang Wenchao lay pale on the hospital bed, yet he kept staring fixedly at Abao. His eyes held both shock and confusion. Having worked as a detective for so many years, he never imagined that one day the person he trusted most would stand on the opposite side of the truth. Faced with her husband's accusations, Abao could no longer hold back. Her emotions instantly collapsed as tears streamed uncontrollably down her face. He cried and shouted at the same time, uttered a sentence that tugged at the heartstrings. So all of this was an exchange from the very beginning. Abao had long known Liang Wenchao's illness had reached an incurable stage. Whisper privately to him, if no miracle occurs, her husband's life might not last much longer. He watched helplessly as Liang Wenchao grew weaker by the day, yet could do nothing about it. Just when he was almost in despair, Wan Yufan's rad technology gave him a glimmer of hope, but the slots for such surgeries are extremely scarce, and the cost is outrageously high. Ordinary people wouldn't even dare to dream about it. So Abao made a decision that caused him immense pain. He used that recording to negotiate with Li Yan. That time, at the crematorium, their seemingly calm conversation was actually full of undercurrents. At that time, Abao had already mastered evidence sufficient to imprison Li Yan, just to make the recording public, and Li Yan would have nowhere to hide. Under this pressure, Li Yan had no choice but to cooperate. Later, Abao took this evidence to Wan Yufan, forcing him to hand over the raw surgery quota. He knew Wan Yufan would never want the truth exposed, so he used this as leverage for an exchange. In the end, Wan Yufan agreed to arrange surgery for Liang Wenchao. Leopard thus crossed the line that police officers must never cross. She chose to conceal evidence to save her husband, even allowing an innocent person to be framed as the murderer. In a sense, he betrayed the badge on his chest and betrayed the justice he once firmly upheld. But from another perspective, she was just a wife desperately trying to save her husband, watching the person she deeply loved march step by step toward death. How many people can consistently adhere to their principles? Some things are easier said than done, but when they actually happen to you, it is incredibly difficult. After the recording was exposed, the direction of the case immediately took a turn. Lian's murder suspicion became almost impossible to clear. But at the same time, Abao also became an accomplice in the whole incident. Liang Wenchao lay on the hospital bed. For a moment, he didn't know how to face this situation. Just as he was caught in a dilemma, an unexpected person appeared. Wan Yufan voluntarily came to the hospital. He looked much more haggard than before, as if he had aged several years overnight. This time, he didn't beat around the bush. Instead, he directly revealed a shocking past incident. That incident almost overturned everyone's understanding. The first thing to clarify is who exactly was the woman in those photos. Tang Suzhen had. The truth turns out to be utterly absurd. That person wasn't a woman at all. It was Wang Shikong himself. To be precise, it was Wang Shikong dressed in women's clothing. It turns out that Wang Shikong had an extremely secretive hobby since his youth. He enjoyed dressing himself up as a woman, and behind this secret lay an even more complicated relationship. Wang Shikong and Wan Yufan were actually a couple. Their relationship wasn't a fleeting impulse, but had lasted for over 20 years. The two had been together since their youth, supporting each other every step of the way. They even built the Wang Group together. But such a relationship must absolutely not be exposed in the public eye. To maintain the image of the family business, Wang Shikong needed a legitimate wife. Thus, Tang Suzhen came into the picture. She appeared to be Wang Shikong's wife, but in reality, she was merely a nominal partner. In other words, she was what is known as a tongqi, gay man's wife. The marriage was an arrangement from the very beginning. Wang Shikong never truly loved her. They didn't even have a normal marital life to produce an heir. This is exactly why the media caught wind of their ambiguous relationship back then. But Tang Suzhen had no idea that the two people she trusted had long been on the same side. As Wang Tianyou grew older, Tang Suzhen began to question her marriage more and more. She could never understand why her husband was so cold toward her, so she hired a private investigator to look into it. What she found out completely shattered her world. In the photos taken by the investigator, one man was her husband, Wang Shikong. The other was Wan Yufan, who had always comforted her. The two were lying in the same bed. One was the man who plunged her into depression. One was the person who pulled her out of the lowest point in her life. Only to discover these two had already been in a romantic relationship. Such a betrayal would be unbearable for anyone. Tang Suzhen completely broke down at that moment. She realized her years of marriage were nothing but an elaborate deception from start to finish. She was neither a wife nor a lover, merely a tool to maintain superficial respectability. One could say she was the most innocent party in this relationship. In despair, she began dabbling in extreme things. She studied Southeast Asian, black magic, and even carved blood curses on her own body, attempting to curse her husband in the most vicious way. She even devised a mad plan. She was preparing to hand all the evidence to journalists to fully expose Wang Shikang and Wang Yufang's secrets. But just as the journalists arrived at the scene, she suddenly changed her decision. Tang Suzhen jumped from a high place. In some legends of black magic, the resentment of suicides is exceptionally intense. They can even conduct so-called soul summoning through certain rituals. These claims sound utterly absurd, yet, during the investigation, they genuinely caused many to waver. It wasn't until Liang Wenchao resumed his duties to investigate that these chaotic clues were gradually untangled. However, what truly sends chills down the spine is Wang Shikang's ambition. As the Wang group grew larger and larger, she gradually developed an almost insane obsession. She wants to control her business empire forever. Power is like poison, impossible to resist once tasted. But fate seemed to play a cruel joke on her. At the peak of her career, she was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. With the little time the doctors gave her, Wang Shikang refused to accept death. So she and Wan Yufan devised that insane plan using RNA, neuroreplication technology, to transfer her consciousness into another body. To achieve this, they began searching for the perfect candidate. Eventually, Li Nian was chosen. A young girl, not well off, driven by a desperate hunger for money. When Wan Yufan offered $100,000, she agreed almost without hesitation. Lured by money, she agreed to become the test subject. After the successful surgery, Wang Shikang not only completed the technological experiment, but also succeeded in controlling his own consciousness within Li Yan's body later. Through in vitro fertilization, he made Li Yan conceive a child to him. This was a perfect plan, continuing to live while also securing an heir. However, he never expected things to spiral out of control. At first, everyone thought the so-called soul transfer technology was already insane enough, but no one anticipated that the technology itself harbored a fatal flaw. The original body must remain alive. In other words, when consciousness is copied and transferred to a new body, the consciousness in the original body did not completely vanish but left behind faint traces of thought, those remnants of consciousness, like a thorn, that could expose the entire secret at any moment. Wang Shikang certainly realized this too. If the old body continued to exist, it would mean that in this world, there would be two Wang Shikangs simultaneously. Once the truth came to light, everything he had painstakingly built would collapse instantly. Thus, an even more cold-blooded plan was born in his mind. Since the entity itself would become a liability, might as well make him disappear completely. To make everything appear as a tragic accident, he set his sights on the most suitable person, his own son, Wang Tianyu. The father-son relationship had been strained for years. Wang Tianyu had nursed a resentment against his father since childhood, compounded by his mother, Tang Suzhen's death, which remained a lingering shadow over his heart. Wang Shikang seized upon this very fact, guided him step by step in the shadows. In Wang Tianyu's perception, his father was not only cold-blooded, but also caused his mother's death. His rage had been simmering for years, only needing the slightest push to erupt completely. So that night, everything went according to plan. Wang Tianyu was lured to the scene, driven by fury, raised the Vajra pestle. He smashed down hard onto Wang Shikang's original body. Yet human nature remains ultimately complex. Even with a heart full of hatred, when truly facing his biological father, Wang Tianyu still couldn't bring himself to strike the fatal blow. After just 2 strikes, he was completely overwhelmed by inner terror. Turning pale, he fled the scene in panic. At that moment, only one person remained in the room, Wang Shikang, gazing at the body on the floor that once belonged to him. His eyes showed not a trace of hesitation. Then he slowly picked up the Vajra pestle. He smashed down hard on that shell. After a few blows, the old self was completely lifeless. Meanwhile, the nanny in the villa also noticed something unusual. He saw Wang Tianyu running out in a panic. Before he could react, police car lights were already flashing at the entrance. All this was actually part of Wang Shikang's plan from the beginning. He had made the police call in advance. As long as Wang Tianyu made a move, the police would arrive at the scene just in time. This way, all the evidence will point to Wang Tianyu. The entire case would turn into a simple municipal corruption case. You could say this was a meticulously planned perfect crime. But man proposes, God disposes. Wang Tianyu's last-minute withdrawal left a fatal flaw in the whole plan. The most critical loophole was that recording hidden by Bao. Later at the police station, Wang Shikang deliberately manipulated Wang Tianyu, making him confess to killing his father in a state of mental breakdown. Once the charges are confirmed, everything can be settled. When Wan Yufan heard this plan, he completely broke down. In his memory, Wang Shikang was once a flesh and blood person. They struggled together in their youth, built the company together, and guarded that forbidden love together. But the current Wang Shikang has become a different person for power and immortality. He could sacrifice anyone, even his own son. Wan Yufan finally realized he had created a monster with his own hands. This is why, when Li Yan escaped, he chased after her like a madman. He wanted to end this mistake with his own hands and erase the sins he had committed. When all the truth came to light, Liang Wenchao found himself trapped in an almost unsolvable dilemma. If he exposed Li Yan's true identity, it would be equivalent to publicly revealing Leopard's crime of concealing evidence under the law. Revealing her true identity would expose Leopard's crime of concealing evidence, which is punishable by law. L is very likely to be sentenced, and his career will be completely ruined. But Liang Wenchao is already a dying man. He doesn't care what happens to himself, but he can't destroy the future of his wife and child. After much deliberation, he finally came up with a plan. This plan will not only make Wang Shikong take the blame willingly, but also protect Abao to the greatest extent. The next day, Liang Wenchao, as a prosecutor, arranged a meeting with Li Yan. During the meeting, Li Yan still carried herself with an air of superiority. His tone was incredibly arrogant, speaking with the same overbearing confidence as Wang Shikong. He even sneered right in front of Liang Wenchao, as if victory was already in his grasp. Outside the door, Wen Yufan listened to these words. The last glimmer of hope in his heart was completely extinguished. He finally understood. The lover from the past had completely vanished. Now standing there was nothing but a monster, consumed by power. Just as tensions reached their peak, Wen Yufan suddenly burst into the office and sprayed a chemical agent at Li Yan. The surveillance footage instantly turned to black. No one knows what truly happened during those few minutes. The situation took a sudden turn just days later. Wen Yufan ended his own life at home. His suicide note contained little explanation, just a brief farewell to this world. Meanwhile, Liang Wenchao also voluntarily confessed to his superiors about concealing evidence in the case. He took all the responsibility upon himself to protect Abao as much as possible. Soon after, something even more unexpected happened. At Tuan Tianyu's court hearing, a familiar figure suddenly appeared. That person was none other than Li Yan. He stood in court and publicly admitted to killing Wang Shikong. The entire process was without hesitation, as if the decision had long been made. Surprisingly, he even bid farewell to Wang Tianyu in Tang Suzhen's tone, like a mother seeing her son off. With his confession, Wang Tianyu's suspicion was completely cleared, and he was ultimately acquitted and released, while Li Yan was sentenced to prison. Not long after, Liang Wenchao's condition suddenly deteriorated. Eventually, he passed away. On the surface, it seemed like everything had come to an end. The guilty were punished, and the wrongs were righted. Those who were meant to leave had already gone. It seemed like the story had reached its conclusion. Yet, the real mystery resurfaced a year later. That day, Abao came to visit Li Yan in prison, holding a child. Through the glass window, the two silently gazed at each other. There was no trace of Wang Shikong's coldness left on Li Yan's face, nor the resentment of Tang Suzhen. Her eyes grew exceptionally tender, just like an ordinary young girl. Not a word was exchanged between them. Only Abao's tears kept streaming down. Just as the visitation was about to end, Li Yan suddenly raised her hand, made a gentle motion. She extended her finger, gently rubbed Abao's forehead. This move left everyone stunned in an instant, because that was exactly how Liang Wenchao expressed love to his wife at the movie's beginning. Only at this moment did everyone finally understand everything. That day in the office, Wen Yufan wasn't persuading Wang Shikong to surrender. They were doing something else entirely. The final consciousness transfer. Using RNA neuroreplication technology, they overwrote Liang Wenchao's consciousness into Li Yan's brain, which means the person who later confessed wasn't the real Wang Shikong, but Liang Wenchao. That is why he voluntarily took the blame. That is why he cleared Wang Tianyu's name. That is why he looked at Abao with that gaze. Liang Wenchao's body had died, yet his consciousness continued to exist in another form. He exchanged the remainder of his life for his wife and child's future, and atoned for all mistakes in this way. Wang Shikong, for power, Gu Xi transformed herself into another person. He even killed his former self with his own hands. Liang Wenchao also chose to enter another body for love, only to imprison himself forever. Both involve consciousness transfer. One seeks greedy immortality, the other offers selfless protection. Wen Yufan's life reads more like a tragedy. He loved someone for over 20 years, only to discover that person had become a monster. But at the final moment, he chose to assist Liang Wenchao in completing the plan, which also served as redemption for his own soul. Abao is the one with the most complicated fate. He once made mistakes, yet he also found a man willing to protect him across life and death. As for Li Yan, he might be the most innocent one, all for just $100,000. He handed over his body and life to others, ultimately becoming the scapegoat in all the conspiracies. The most shocking aspect of this film lies in its use of an icy cold, sci-fi premise to tell a profoundly human story, burning with intensity. Technology can replicate memories and even transfer consciousness, but the desires and emotions within the human heart can never be simply copied. Some will stop at nothing for power, while others willingly sacrifice everything for love. As the story concludes, we're compelled to ponder one question. If one day the person you deeply love had a completely different face, even altering their gender, but his soul remains there, would you still love him as you did before? Perhaps this is the core message the work intends to convey. What truly defines who a person is never the appearance but the soul, and so it is with love.